Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, home of the Penny Patrol, KIDO Talk Radio. Find out how you can help Treasure Valley families this spring. Go to KIDOTalkRadio.com and sign up to be part of the Penny Patrol with Kevin Miller. Joining us now, American Hemp, how growing our newest cash crop can improve our health, clean our environment, and slow climate change is Jen Hobbs, joining us from Missouri. Jen, good morning.
Hi, Kevin. Great to be here.
Great to have you with us. So now, full disclosure, many people will agree with you. They love the hemp. For me, I'm not really down with it. We had a very contentious fight in our state legislature trying to legalize the hemp. That didn't happen. But we'd love to hear your perspective about how hemp is the new best thing ever, ma'am.
Well, yeah, I did hear about that situation. I just find it a little odd because, the federal government has now taken it off of the Schedule 1 narcotics list and put it as an agricultural crop. So, it's defined, and all of its properties are defined as an agricultural crop, which means that farmers can get crop insurance now. They can, cows, and operate as, normal businesses as any other industry. So the way that I see it is, after the USDA comes out with their official rules, and at the end of this year, as they're going to get that all set up for the 2020 growing season. So, I just see it as a great thing for the economy. Obviously, there's a lot of different uses for hemp. It's a nutritional source. It's a source that we can make biodegradable plastic from. That's already happening right now in Europe. They're using it in car paneling. Usually that's with carbon fiber, and hemp is a more eco-friendly means of producing that.
Sure, but if hemp was so great to begin with, why was it banned by the federal government? And in the state of Idaho, it still is banned, and we'll get to the concerns about that, Jen. But, it was, as you said, a narcotic. Now it's an agricultural thing. That's a big switcheroo.
Well, yes, but it was never actually a drug. So a Schedule 1 narcotic is defined as a substance with zero medical benefits and a highly addictive substance, which is the same classification as heroin. Hemp is not an addictive substance. It's not a drug. It never has been, never will be, always was a crop. The issue here is that it looks similar to marijuana, which is why it was lumped in with marijuana. They're both cannabis plants, but they're looked at as cousins. They have different genetics. They have different purposes, and they've been used for different things for obviously, hundreds of thousands of years. Just because it, appeared similar, the seeds look similar, that was the reasoning behind it, among some other issues where actually a lot of the people in our country who had businesses that competed with hemp also lobbied to get hemp lumped into that category. So there's been this big misconception in our country for quite a long time. And really what it comes down to is, educating people about what hemp is and what hemp isn't.
Well, hemp is in the marijuana neighborhood, is it not? And many people here are concerned. By the way, if you have a question for Jen Hobbs, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller with you, talking about hemp, Idaho hemp, American hemp. But it is in the relative family of marijuana, and the concern in a place like Idaho is we can't tell the difference between the hemp and the dope.
Well, that's also a misconception because you can tell the difference. The two plants grow extremely differently. Hemp plants grow straight up like bamboo. They look similar to like a corn stalk, but they grow much taller. Marijuana looks more like a bush or a shrub. It's fatter. The leaves are fatter. They're also grown completely differently. If you're growing marijuana outside, it looks more like an apple orchard because the plants need to be spaced out. Hemp is not grown that way. It's grown, like I said, more like corn. It's grown very, very close together. So if you're going through, if you're looking at it specifically the way that it's grown, you can definitely tell the difference between the two plants. It's quite obvious. And that goes if you're growing it if you're growing it outdoors or, marijuana indoors, you can still tell the difference between the two, just genetically speaking. It also, marijuana, the major difference obviously is the THC content. So marijuana has a higher THC content. That is the psychoactive element. That's the element that gets you high. And hemp does not have nearly enough of it to get you high. You can smoke it all you want. It will not get you high. That's why it's, not considered a drug substance. And the THC count is 0.3% or less typically.
Right.
And that can be tested. It has been tested. There are means to test it. Obviously, that's part of the whole Farm Bill program, is that people that are growing it do have to go and get it tested a couple times through the growing season to make sure that it's below that percentage. But one thing you might not know about the two crops is that hemp pollen actually turns marijuana into hemp. So if marijuana is growing near...
Right, hold on, Jen. Okay, we've covered that, and I appreciate it. Let's get to some phone calls. And by the way, you talk to law enforcement here, and they can tell you they can't tell the difference. So let's go to Chris in Boise with Jen Hobbs talking about hemp. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. I have a historical question. You can validate me. It's my understanding that years ago in the United States, and it was a very common crop, hemp. But the cotton industry began to compete with hemp, and because they are used in very similar products, rope and clothing and et cetera, the cotton industry went after the hemp industry and successfully got it banned through Congress years ago, and the cotton industry, of course, took off and boomed. Now, do you have any confirmation of that?
Well, that was always that is one of the industries that always found hemp to be a I guess you could say a competitor. And historically speaking, yes, what happened was there's the cotton gin, which obviously revolutionized that particular industry. And there was also a hemp gin that did something similar. Due to different wars that we had over the course of the period of time when the hemp gin was under patent, we were not able to get the hemp gin into America. And then during the 1930s, the technology behind harvesting hemp did change. It evolved, and we saw more, farmers wanting to get into it. And obviously, at that point, cotton was an established industry. Another industry, I don't know if you've heard of the name William Randolph Hearst.
Yeah.
But he had the largest newspaper chain in the country. He built Hearst Communications, and he owned and operated forests that were used to produce all the paper for his newspapers. So he also found hemp to be in obviously direct competition to that, because you can make paper from hemp. And he also lobbied to get it lumped into the Marijuana Tax Act as well. And there's other instances of that I also talk about in the book. And it's so interesting because after that act was passed, which is what started the ban, we essentially reversed it so that we could grow hemp during World War II to manufacture everything we needed for the war.
All right,
so the
Chris.
Parachute Corps.
Chris,
thank you.
Thank you for the call. More of your phone calls. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Jen Hobbs joining us now. What's the name of your book, Jen? I know the blog, but the book?
Sure. So the name of the book is American Hemp: How Growing Our Newest Cash Crop Can Improve Our Health, Clean Our Environment, and Slow Climate Change.
Well, the only thing you're not pushing is a clean colon. Let's go to the phones, and we go to Ryan in Boise, talking hemp this morning on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning to both of you. Hey, I just want to know, what are the stats? You say it's a cash crop. Do you have any stats to back that up, and stats for the U.S. and then just stats for the world? You can go into that a little bit. I appreciate it.
Sure. So I do have stats in the book, just to pull up off the top of my head here. It's I can figure that out in the book real quick.
Wait a minute. Why don't we just do a ballpark here, Ryan? Thank you for the call. We're hearing you can make 50, 60 grand an acre.
Oh, yeah. Well, it depends on what you're farming. If you're going
with
for
hemp.
CBD, then that is, yes. If you're farming hemp for CBD, then yes, that is accurate.
Now we hear that price is going to be cut in half, though, once more states legalize the hemp and more supply will go onto the market.
It's difficult to say. The way that I see it is, you have so many industries like, the beer industry. You have they have it already in products. There's, I just heard the other day, there's a fast food chain that's doing a CBD burger. So, it's being incorporated into a lot of different already existing products. So I can see it as something that's going to continue to expand.
All right. Let's go to Tea Party Bob, the biggest pro-hempster in the Treasure Valley, with Jen Hobbs on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tea Party Bob.
Good morning, and happy hemp to you, Mr. Miller. And how are you today?
I'm not very hempy, but go ahead.
Okay, well, let's hemp on this. Jan, when we talk about hemp and we talk about other cash crops, is it or is it not true that growing hemp uses less water than most other crops and is much more valuable in terms of its end value when it's put into a manufactured product? The other thing is, isn't it the job of law enforcement to catch up with industry rather than industry backing up into law enforcement? When you have a problem with alcohol, they have alcohol meters. Now, if you have a problem with hemp, you should have some way to measure that. It's not the problem, of us to worry, or the farmer to worry about it. It's the law enforcement's problem. Am I correct or not?
You're incorrect.
I do believe that 100%. First off, as the crop goes, yes, it takes much less water than the traditional agricultural crop. It also helps with all different types of farming methods that I get into in the book. For organic farming, and it also helps remove toxins from the soil. There's a bunch of different things that this plant does that's really pretty incredible just by the way that it grows. It sequesters more carbon than trees do or any other agricultural crop. And it can be made into many different products in a more eco-friendly means. And to stay on your last point, the DEA has completely backed off of this crop, obviously, because it's no longer in their jurisdiction. And they've said, we would appreciate help from, private industries that already have these technologies to figure out, the THC content, if we can make that into something that's mobile, that we can bring on, that local law enforcement can bring on the road. But they are already working on that. And, it's so funny because we're not the only country that is looking to grow hemp. I mean, if you look to our neighbors to the north, Canada has figured this out. They've been growing it since 1998. They have a very big export business. That's actually the majority of hemp products that we have in the United States now come from Canada. You look at China, you look at, anywhere in Europe, they've been growing it. They've been able to figure this out. So I don't think it's a matter of reinventing the wheel here. I think the wheel is already here. We just have to actually implement it.
All right, Tea Party Bob, thank you for the call. But again, let's face it. Nobody wants to be Canada. We're America. Just because the Canadians do it doesn't mean that we have to do it. And just because the federal government, hold on, let me finish. Just because the federal government does it doesn't mean that Idaho has to do it.
No, Idaho doesn't have to do it, but you do have a very large farming community
Sure.
in Idaho, and I'm pretty sure that they would appreciate the opportunity to grow it. That it's been a very large advocacy movement for farmers. If you look at Kentucky, I mean, it's been really helping them out.
Right.
Just
We're familiar with Kentucky. We're also familiar with our law enforcement here who has some issues with it. We go to Steve in Nampa for Jen Hobbs on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Hi, Jen. I'm hearing you say all these things, and you say something like, well, it's really helpful for Kentucky, and it has all these miracle properties of cleansing the soil. You haven't cited a source. You haven't cited any hard data. Where can we, I hate to use the term fact check, but where can we get these facts?
Sure.
Also,
So,
I feel that growing hemp, legalizing hemp is merely a gateway. The next step, which is legalizing marijuana in Idaho. And I'd also, if I may, and I apologize for going so long, I'd like to challenge Mr. Tea Party Bob. He's claiming that law enforcement needs to keep up, and they've got alcohol meters, so they should get a hemp meter. Who's going to pay for that, Mr. Tea Party? The taxpayers. So anyway, back to Jen. Where are you getting your facts, and can you defend your position that this is not a gateway to just growing dope?
Okay, sure. So in the book, I have extensive notes that all come from research papers, from papers that have been published in independent journals, peer-reviewed journals.
What journal?
JAMA.
Can you name a journal?
Yes, JAMA.
Yeah.
It's a medical
how's
journal.
That spelled? JAMA. There's a bunch of other. They're all primary sources that come from scientists from all different sorts of research documents. I have. What does JAMA
web
stand for, if you don't mind me asking? What is JAMA?
It's a medical peer-reviewed research journal. They cover a lot of different
What's
medical.
the acronym stand for? I'm just curious. I work in an ancillary industry to science and medicine, and I've never even heard of that one, but I could be all wet. So
That's okay. I don't know the acronym off the top of my head. I apologize, but I have medical articles that are from pharmacology publications. I have the list. It's actually very extensive. The amount of publications that I've gone into here. Some of the information comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Some of it comes from Science Daily, the New York Times. I get into bioorganic and medical chemistry.
Okay, well, I really haven't gotten much. I'll look up this JAMA thing. In terms of federal law, do you have any idea? Can you give us any info on federal law and growing hemp?
As far as what part of the law do you need to know?
Well, is it legal under federal law to grow hemp for purposes other than producing buds that have THC, high potency THC? Are there federal guidelines to grow hemp to keep hemp a certain percentage of THC? Is it legal essentially 50 statewide? Not 50 statewide. I meant there's this thing called the Federal Supremacy Clause.
Sure.
So is hemp legal to grow in the U.S.?
And Steve, we're going to let you go on that one. It is, according to the federal government. In Idaho, it isn't. Jen, we appreciate you. Quickly, the name of your book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Where can we get it?
So you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that books are sold. It's called American Hemp, How Growing Our Newest Cash Crop Can Improve Our Health, Clean Our Environment, and Slow Climate Change.
All right, Jen Hobbs, we appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
You're listening to Kevin Miller. Your call's next, KIDO Talk Radio.
I think it's also critical to understand that, as I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you.
There we have it, the new narrative. Hillary Clinton talking about that the election was stolen from her. Boy, that's a laughable way to start the day. Kevin Miller in the morning. More of your calls on hemp legalization, marijuana legalization, and one state in the West, they're going to legalize the shrooms, and we're not talking about Oregon. Tell you who that state is next and get your reaction. First, KIDO Talk Radio, traffic and weather together, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Dave. Kevin Miller in the morning. Let's see if we can squeeze in Julie from Star. Good morning, Julie.
Oh, good morning, Kevin. Hey, I was just calling in to clarify JAMA. It's the Journal of American Medical Association, so it is a highly respected journal. So just that info.
Well, we appreciate you adding to the discussion and the information, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Julie. More coming up next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Wake it up on the right side, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Joining us now, Jared Halpern of Fox News Radio. Jared, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin.
So we take a look at our, early in the week, look at the action, adventure, and excitement of all that is Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. And because my run sheet has already been blown up by the network, I'm relying on you to set the table for us, sir.
Well, we just heard from the majority leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, his first sort of lengthy remarks on the Mueller report, where he said this is a case closed as far as he's concerned, and accused his Democratic colleagues of going through the 5 stages of grief over the report's conclusions. I think there is a sense from a lot of Republicans that they do want to move on. That's not going to satisfy Democrats who still have an awful lot of questions and are still expressing a desire to hear directly from Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Perhaps we get some more clarity this week as to whether or not Mueller will testify next week, as a Democratic panel had hoped to do. The other thing that we're waiting on is whether or not Don McGahn will be allowed to testify for the House Judiciary Committee. That is something that the White House has sort of sent mixed signals about. They've argued that, he sat down for 30 hours of testimony with the special counsel. There's nothing left for him to answer for Congress, that they could invoke some sort of executive privilege. Now, Democrats say they can't invoke executive privilege because the toothpaste is already out of the tube since they didn't invoke it for him to talk to the special counsel. So that's what we're going to be looking at this week, is whether or not, anybody else comes forward now to testify. Oh, and the Attorney General could get a contempt citation from the Judiciary Committee as soon as tomorrow. We'll see what comes out of a meeting later today between Judiciary Committee leaders and the Justice Department as they continue to negotiate over access to a non-redacted version of the Russia report.
Boy, it never gets old when you're thinking about the Russian report, Robert Mueller. It really comes down to the president in this Don McGahn testimony. Are there any behind-the-scenes negotiations that we may or may not know of?
There may be, but it doesn't seem like it's going to, perhaps they can work out an agreement where he meets with the committee and it's not public, or he meets and, there's White House counsel present. I'm not sure what they're going to do. Whether or not they invoke executive privilege, that obviously would probably set some sort of courtroom fight, because Democrats would argue that they can't exert executive privilege because they didn't exert it the first time he spoke, and you can't privilege something that's already been talked about and written about in the Mueller report. So I think that's probably what we're going to be looking at. We expect that decision later today, because that's what the subpoena calls for from the House of Representatives. So we'll see if the White House, pushes back. But again, it sounds like from the president's point of view, he's ready to move on, does not want any other testimony, has actually expressly said he's not going to let anybody else testify. And he is getting some Republican allies in the Senate, particularly in the House, who back him up on that.
Is that really the key to all of this, Jared, if the president gets cover from the Republicans in the House and Senate?
Well, that's part of it, because it certainly then would cast this as sort of a partisan issue. Obviously, I think the administration's argument is weakened if there's sort of a bipartisan buy-in that we want to hear from more people, and the president's obstructing what is a bipartisan investigation. So far, that's not been the case. It has been the Democratic-led committees in the House who have demanded this new information. The Republican-led committees in the Senate, by and large, have not. You don't have a hearing set with Mueller or McGahn in the Senate Judiciary Committee led by Republican Lindsey Graham in the way that you have these subpoenas going out from the House Judiciary Committee led by Democrat Jerrold Nadler.
Indeed, a tale of two worlds, Lindsey Graham and Jerrold Nadler. Very different personalities.
Sure, yeah. Certainly running their committees a little bit differently. Both frequent guests, though, on cable news, so you'll see a lot of them.
Finally, any other business going on? Or this dominates the headlines, but
that's a good point. That's what we just heard from the Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, who's complained that the Senate's become a legislative graveyard. He said the only thing that Mitch McConnell wants to do is confirm people, which is true. They are confirming a lot of judges, a lot of sub-cabinet positions as well in the Senate, and he has complained that there is not enough legislating going on. Now, obviously, the challenge of legislating in the Senate is, you need bipartisanship. It takes 60 votes to advance debate. I'm curious, in the next week or two, we are supposed to get that follow-up meeting at the White House about infrastructure. Remember, they walked away saying that they had agreed to invest $2 trillion over 10 years on infrastructure. This is a meeting that the president had with only Democrats. In the, I should say members of Congress were only Democrats. There were administration officials in there, too, but had this meeting with congressional Democrats about infrastructure, $2 trillion. The White House is supposed to present a plan to these lawmakers in the next week or two over how to pay for a $2 trillion infrastructure upgrade. There are already some Republicans who are throwing some cold water on some of the things that have been floated, whether it be a gas tax or something like that. So I think that will be our first sign of what kind of bipartisan will exist in Congress and perhaps what kind of muscle the president has. Can he get Republicans on board with a plan that they may not be in love with for the sake of advancing something that has been important to both the president and the Democrats, which is infrastructure upgrades in the amount of about $1.5 or $2 trillion.
And Jared, finally, we keep hearing again and again about the impeachment, yes or no. Any movement there at all?
No, I think, Democratic leadership for sure is not there yet. They certainly want to get some of these other folks in to hear from them, whether it be Robert Mueller or whether it be Don McGahn, to sort of take a very methodical, process-based approach to any sort of whiff of impeachment. And again, remember, the other argument I have heard from Democrats is there is an election in 18 months, and impeachment is a big, big thing to do. That's why we don't do it very much in this country. And, you also have a sense from some Democratic leadership that they would not pursue it without some sort of bipartisan buy-in as well. Again, they don't want this to be framed as a mere partisan thing to do. I think right now what you're going to see is moving forward with a lot of these investigations. How much cooperation do they get with the White House as it comes to subpoenas, documents, calls, requests for testimony? Now, if that completely shuts off, that is walled off, perhaps that changes the conversation. But I don't get a sense that we're at that stage yet with these Democratic leaders.
Jared, we always appreciate your insight. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Jared Halpern joining us, Fox News Radio, live from Capitol Hill, only on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM in the Treasure Valley. Okay, we've talked hemp, we've talked Democrats, we've talked Congress. Let's talk magic mushrooms.
The city of Denver votes for mayor today and on a measure that would begin the process of decriminalizing psilocybin, magic mushrooms, which supporters say can serve medical purposes and is safer than pot and alcohol.
Nobody deserves to go to jail for something that has a therapeutic benefit.
Kevin Matthews with the group Decriminalize Denver. Psychedelic mushrooms can send users into an altered state for hours. Opponents say the decriminalization of psilocybin, just like pot in Colorado, could eventually lead to full legalization, making Denver a drug haven. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Denver is a drug haven. By the way, here's a saying. Thanks, Obama. Thank you, former President Barack Obama, for not enforcing the nation's drug laws, for allowing states like Colorado, Oregon, Washington, the lawbreakers, to legalize pot, because now we've opened Pandora's box. Oregon, as you know, we were the first to report that the state of Oregon was looking at legalizing the shrooms because, hey, let's decriminalize it. It's better for you than pot. And by the way, medical experts, law enforcement personnel, they're just closed-minded. We'll just say bigoted. Why? Why not throw in the B word? Because we throw in everything else against plant-based herbal self-healing, I guess. Convoluted sentence. Convoluted issue. Not really. Legalizing magic mushrooms. And you notice the pro-pot purveyors, whether it's hemp, whether it's marijuana, now magic mushrooms, they're always talking about the medical benefits and how opioids are horrible and we have an opioid problem. And we do. We do have a huge problem with opioids. And if any of you caught last week's, 2 weeks ago, 60 Minutes, where this fentanyl thing is the most lethal chemical imaginable, and you can buy it from the Chinese. That's right. You can get on the internet, over 50 websites. You can buy it from the Chinese, and it kills people. Where you have people that are, they've built up resistance. They're not like, they're not like people that aren't used to taking the drugs. Hardcore users that do the heroin and all this, dying. There was a young man, 35, 38 years old, in the prime of his life, didn't even get the injection of fentanyl in his body before he died. You've got Scott Pelley, you've got the FBI people in a glass-encased room wearing gloves. They've got a doctor standing by because in case the seal breaks on the plastic. You're talking a few ounces can kill an entire city. It's no joke. And people are going to say, well, the pharmaceutical industry is bad. Yeah, I like the pharmaceutical industry as much as I like big oil. However, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, eventually you have to take a stand. Like our friend Ted last hour, keep Middleton drug-free. He's starting a GoFundMe page for those folks to get a drug-sniffing dog. God bless the canines. God bless the canine officers. We're losing a lot of them. Why? Because they're sniffing up the drugs and it's killing them. Now you have people that don't love animals like I do or you do and say, well, better them than us. How about we strengthen our social, legal, government institutions instead of weakening them? Why not sit there and say to ourselves, no, you're not going to legalize the mushrooms, Denver. We'll go in and lock up the mayor. How can you do that? It's free, man. Groovy. Are you kidding me? This is why you just nip it in the bud. What? Literally, no pun intended. You nip the bud. You nip the bud when we're talking about all the good things of drug legalization. Well, a little hemp isn't going to hurt you. It's just like a potato chip. You have one, you can't stop. Then it's medical marijuana. And trust us, we're going to do our very best. You can't tell me. And by the way, the state of Washington, they're going through the same thing we did during our legislative session. Well, you're going to make, now it's down to $20,000 an acre. The idea of legalizing hemp leads to medical marijuana, leads to marijuana, leads to magic mushrooms, leads to what else? Now, what's next? Heroin? And people say, well, what's the big deal? Tell that to the people in the schools. Tell that to the people that are struggling with the edibles that are now, in my opinion, they're poisoning the food, putting that in kids' lunches and such. Accidentally, inadvertently. Well, if they didn't have access to it, there wouldn't be an accident. Now, would there? And then this one more time. Again, it amazes me. I don't know where, well, I do know where the Attorney General is. He's worried about Robert Mueller instead of this.
The city of Denver votes for mayor today and on a measure that would begin the process of decriminalizing psilocybin, magic mushrooms, which supporters say can serve medical purposes and is safer than pot and alcohol.
Nobody deserves to go to jail for something that has a therapeutic benefit.
Kevin Matthews with the group Decriminalize Denver. Psychedelic mushrooms can send users into an altered state for hours. Opponents say the decriminalization of psilocybin, just like pot in Colorado, could eventually lead to full legalization, making Denver a drug haven. Jeff Manosso, Fox News.
You know, in Canyon County, they've got an issue with the jail and the voting on the jail and everything else. Maybe caught our Idaho Insights on it this week. Let's just decriminalize everything. Let's decriminalize gambling. Let's decriminalize prostitution. Let's decriminalize speeding. Heck, we practically do that already. Let's decriminalize assault. Let's decriminalize battery. Let's just decriminalize it, right? Won't that send the right message? Max in Garden City with Kay Milley on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Max.
And a good morning to you too, my friend. Yesterday I was speaking with a friend of mine who lives in the Netherlands. He's a trauma physician over there. And he's told me some absolute horror stories about this gentle drug, marijuana. Very recently, they got an infant. Baby was about 9, maybe 8 months old. And it died from complications of THC in its formula. Apparently, the parents decided that it was a way to keep the baby from crying so much. And he said it's better than half of their admissions to ER are drug-related. And he says no matter what drug they're taking, he said you can bet your butt you'll find marijuana in their pocket. And in their blood.
Now, repeat that one more time. They were putting the dope in the kid's formula?
Yeah, they were doping the baby's formula so that it would not be so colicky and cry so much. And it was at the recommendation of an unnamed doctor who told them that this would ease the child's pain in his tummy. Well, the child's pain is eased now into a very small white box underground. Guys, as I've said before, I have yet to see or hear of any peer-reviewed study that gives any credence to medical marijuana beyond what's already available. Marijuana is a gateway drug. These people come into his OR. They come in ER. They're stoned out of their minds. They have complications, renal shutdown, liver failure everywhere. And it's not always marijuana alone, but he said when you undress them and you robe them and you get them into the wards, you're finding marijuana in their pockets. You're finding marijuana in their blood. They contribute to what are called polydrug deaths. In almost every polydrug death, 2 things you can count on: alcohol and marijuana is going to be in the mix. If you don't stop it now, it'll stop you. The problem is we don't have any mechanism to stop it because the only way you could stop it would be to put Gestapo in every street corner. That's not happening in my country. I live in the land of the free. Unfortunately, one of the prices for that freedom is watching people do stupid things to themselves, like driving drunk and slaughtering children, drinking drugs, taking drugs, and killing people. You know what? The only answer is righteousness. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be enough.
Well, it isn't, and we've got to keep that drug-free message going. Thank you, Max.
All right, buddy. Take care.
And let's hear from you next before Glenn Beck. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Blessed to be with you. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO, keeping Idaho drug-free. By the way, coming up, how you can help the Boise Rescue Mission first. KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, traffic and weather together. Let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave. And Kevin Miller reminding you, Miller's mission is underway this year. Well, we're adding to it. It's called the Penny Patrol. Frankly, we need your pennies. Frankly, we need you to start collecting because we need the more pennies we get, the more money, the more cash, the more donations we can make to our friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. You can find out how you or your business or you and your business can contribute by going to KIDOTalkRadio.com. You can go to the Kevin Miller Show Facebook or to my personal Facebook page and check out the video we put together on how throughout the years you've made a difference helping our great friends at the Boise Rescue Mission. We look so forward to hearing the great stories of inspiration. And, of course, we need you now more than ever. Why? Well, the new tax rules, charitable deductions have taken a hit. And the Boise Rescue Mission, They fund all their services through your generous donation. So won't you help us help them? Details at KIDOTalkRadio.com. Maria Maya, great job as always. God bless everyone, and keep the faith.